a current job in a windowless top secret facility that I hope that he'll either talk about or mention. Please welcome William Volk to give his talk.
Yeah. Thank you. Is this mic working okay? Can you hear me okay? No? Test.
This is for the room. That is for the camera.
Okay, but is it working?
It is.
All right, well, good. This talk will be about a pretty interesting time in the video game industry, but it'll also be more than that. It'll be a talk about what I learned about myself and about business and about games and all that. So let's just go through this because it's a huge talk, and I'm going to make it fast. Basically, I actually was extraordinarily lucky as a kid, as a young guy. I was working as a playtester at a company I started in '79 at Avalon Hill, and I came up with this game, and this thing shipped on tape. That's how long ago it is. And you'll find out later why I made some mistakes here. The game I'm most famous for, of course, is a 1993 game where I was the technical producer, did the game engine, UI, the Return to Zork. This is probably the most famous scene in that game. Did really well. But what's really funny is the only game I was really successful in since then was a mobile game that I basically helped produce called Bocce Ball, which became the largest selling Bocce Ball game. Hit #1 in apps in Italy, whoopie doo. So I've had every job in the business. I've been an executive, I've been a developer, designer, chief marketing officer, and CEO at various points, which is weird. And now I'm actually, for the first time in my life, working in physics, which was my original degree. I got my start playing around with animation. Had this camera, did animation with my brother when I was in junior high. I made a decision to get into games for the absolute wrong reason. I saw this scene in 2001, and I also liked this game, Star Trek. Loved this game in the arcades, loved this game on Apple II, and decided to get back into games. And of course, loved the traditional adventure game, the text adventure game. Started playing that in the late 70s on ARPANET when I was at University of Pennsylvania. So I was really intrigued by this. And I got to use this computer, and got to do some games, got to get an ARPANET with that system, and basically, I am the luckiest man in the world because this is it, I applied for a first-time job playtesting games, and I got a 36-year career in the video game business, with ups and downs, mind you. I got extremely lucky, but I never realized how lucky I was. I started playtesting games. I wrote my first video game, and it got published. And I saw this TV show called Star Blazers or Spaceship Yamamoto, ripped it off, did Conflict 2500, it got published. That's what it looks like. The game made me, I was in grad school, the game made me thousands of dollars. I thought nothing of it. I was so stupid not to realize what was going on. Then I did this overly ambitious game with procedurally generated levels and 3D graphics on the TRS-80 and other machines, made even more money. That's what it looked like on the better computers. It was actually a first-person 3D shooter, blah, blah. And then I got super lucky because a friend of mine asked me to write a game on air traffic control, and Reagan did this, and we made more money per hour doing that game than anything in my life, which is bizarre. And look how much it sold for. This is in 1982. It sold for $25 or $30, and that kind of money, that's like $70, $80 now. Of course, now we just give away games. And that's what it looked like. It was just an air traffic control simulation with radar sweep, and you got to get the planes to land. Pretty cute. Then the video game industry collapses, but at that same time the video game collapsed, I took a job doing productivity software on this, and I ended up, because I had an education that people thought meant something, which it really didn't, they ended up putting me in charge of all the West Coast, so I became a management person running the West Coast on Valdox. We talk about failure. This was a huge failure. Valdox failed totally. And it failed because we tried to do so much on a Z80 when IBM was rolling out better machines and Apple had the Mac. But I got a Mac, and I basically grabbed the Mac and started writing this game, and in 30 days came up with this 3D similar game, 3D maze game, a real-time adventure called the Peril, go to the first Mac World show, and form a company called Aegis. Then I do this game, which is unlucky, Mac Challenger, the Space Shuttle Simulator, first flight simulator for the Mac. And what's interesting, Aegis was a startup, and we were in our 20s, late 20s, and Aegis became known as the Amiga company. We did a lot of Amiga software. And the big mistake here was thinking that it could happen again. We were a bunch of crazy, outrageous people And we thought we would have the chance to do something like Aegis again. We built the company from a $50,000 investment to millions of dollars, leading Amiga company. We were doing stuff on the Mac that never saw the light of day. That was incredible. And we blew it all up. That's Challenger. There's a picture of me. This will actually play a role in my next talk. I was extraordinarily overweight. I'm on the left. And luckily, though, this is now one of the luckiest moments in my life. We published this game called Ports of Call by two Germans, Ralph Dieter Klein, Martin Urich. It's a sort of Zynga-like economy game where you try to build your shipping business by running ships around. That plays a role. And then I get involved with CD-ROM because of Mr. Gates, and mistakes were made. We could have been a contender. And then this is what happened. I go to Activision in '88 and eventually become the vice president of Activision. My kids give me crap about this all the time. I found these people, another good thing. I paid attention the first week I was there, stack of floppies. What is this? It's a HyperCard thing called the Manhole. And so basically, I convinced Activision to let me build a CD-ROM based on the Manhole. It is the first CD-ROM game. Cyan, who did it, went on to do something called Myst. That's what the game looked like. It was basically characters that animated and talked to you. Cyan did Myst, big deal. Okay, best story about Activision ever. A friend goes to a comic convention in New York, gets the rights to a comic on a handshake, $20,000 worldwide rights, goes back to Activision. The focus group tests it, and the result of the focus group is teenage boys show little interest in anthropomorphic turtles. So Activision turned down. It's true. Activision in the late 80s resembled Grandma's Boy. That's all I can say. There's the guy who saved my ass because he comes into Activision in '91 and fires everyone. But he kept me around because he knew me because his other company published Ports of Call. What are the odds of that? So he published Ports of Call, keeps me on, Bobby Kotick, and I do this game which bombs like you wouldn't believe, totally fails. We did this when we were in bankruptcy, and we're all pissed off. So what do we do when we're angry? We basically get back at the industry. We do this game deliberately unfair, and it does extraordinarily well. That's design, that's some of the graphics. It had an interface that was so crazy out there. Virtual cameras to take pictures of scenes. You talk to characters, and they describe what you show them the picture. They talk about it. It was just an incredible game. And then I made the fortuitous decision in '94 that I wanted to leave Activision because I wanted to do something for the children. I wanted to do educational software. So I go to this company called Lightspan, which is the biggest educational company you've never heard of. $125 million spent to build this stuff. We built 100 titles, but we started on this. This is how I saved the company. We were on Apple set-top boxes, and it all disappeared, and then I had to make a decision. What machine to pick? PlayStation. Pick the PlayStation amongst all these machines. We built 100 CDs. Lightspan did a lot of things right. The thing they did wrong is never go to retail. They only sold to schools. And they go public, billion-dollar valuation, and then the entire dot-com bust. And I end up with very little. Okay, so then I get into mobile games. This is another insane story. These are the Wayans brothers. You know them, right? They did a card game called The Dozens, which was Yo Mama Insults. But it turns out that I had done the same game. So in the beginning of 2004, I came up with this idea to do a Yo Mama game because someone came with the idea, and I did this game, had these cards in my pocket, went to Comic-Con, and found out the Wayans were doing the same thing. Rather than and I was the CEO of this company, mind you, people were depending on me, and I said, no one is to tell them that we have the game already. Let's just get the mobile game rights. And so there's their game, and we get the mobile game rights. This is the mobile game. This is 2005. In-game chat, viral invites, selling the game by pushing the game to people, way out there, way out there in terms of technology. Basically, we should have been Zynga. We did other games as well. There's me at E3 with the Wayans. The Wayans actually do some great things. Let me go back one. And what happened here is a very sad moment in my life. I should almost, I'll tell you honestly, talk about failure. The investors put someone in who had an SEC pass. Even though we would go to the Silicon Valley and talk about bonus mobile games that people play together, the VCs would love us at first and never talk to us again because the CFO the company put in had a problem with the SEC. And what's more, the Wayans went a little too crazy with the game, so Walmart wouldn't carry the card game. Every card pack had instructions on how to get the mobile game onto your phone. Just text such and such and such and such. Walmart rejected them. They went to Blockbuster, so that was no thing. We ran out of money, and the whole thing blew up. totally blew up in my face. Probably the lowest moment of my life. Then I co-formed a company with one of my partners at Bonus Mobile called MyNumo to do a ringtone portal. We're going to let people publish their own ringtones. This sounded like a good idea. What we found is that most of the artists couldn't promote themselves. Plus, MySpace was making it hard. That's Sherry Kuno. She's a genius. I still work with her. I've worked with this woman. She has her own marriage and all that, but I worked with her for over a decade. She's a brilliant person. I'm working with her now even. Then Paris Hilton. We did a stupid game to promote MyNumo called Free Paris Out of Jail, and we're trying to figure out what to do next, and we hear this. I love this fucking quote. I love this video. And so we decided we're going to get back at Steve Ballmer. So we come up with this game, and we actually get this game out the weekend the iPhone ships. So I have the first CD-ROM game, and I worked on the first iPhone game. This is the first iPhone game, web-based game. Ballmer pops out of holes, you tap on him, I whack, right? And then we do a whole bunch of web games on the iPhone. This is MyNumo, it's really cool, but to survive, we do whatever we can. We don't have any funding, so we do all these various apps for people, cool stuff. I closed a really great license deal with Kenny Rogers, but Sony Records fucks it up because they won't let me use the Gambler music. We use the Gambler music, we were willing to link to their freaking page in iTunes, no way. But you can see here, we had one of the first apps in the App Store, Remelody. We had these games. Then Bocce Bowl hits number 3 in the App Store of all games. Pretty amazing. Do a whole bunch of interesting games. The poker thing is surprisingly interesting. I get the company funded because I got the license to do poker game with Phil Ivey, the famous poker player. And we get the company funded, sell the company, I become chief creative officer instead of CEO, and we end up jumping into casino games like a madman because we can make money in the UK with that. The Phil Ivey deal blew up. This is what we did, and this is what I was doing, and honestly, I did not enjoy running an online casino, but that's what we did. So that was interesting. And then Apple, once again, ruins my day. I came up with this. I'm sorry I did. But I was on a woman's website, I forgot which one, and they had this game on the web. The woman's website had a game where you identify celebrities from behind. I hooked up with a company that had the photos, and the celebrities were all for it. Yes, I know this is terrible, but of course Apple and Google told us to go pound sand, so that didn't happen. Then we hit watch apps, and I can tell you right now, now that I'm not working for a game company, I can tell you that Apple can be a real pain in the ass. We did this incredible blackjack game on the watch, and Apple screwed up the App Store. You only see like 7 apps on the App Store for the watch. So that killed that. And then I get into virtual reality. And this is another example of just not having the right timing. We start doing virtual reality projects. We have Edison's Lab. We walk around Edison's Lab helping them out by finding items, a sort of hidden object game. And then I meet someone who was associated with the educational software company, and they have a deal to put kiosks into 5,000 museums worldwide. We did this documentary, work on this documentary, Oceans of Plastic, at E3 2017. I closed the deal to finance this and a whole bunch of stuff. Beautiful work on this. And the VR world dies. So VR looked like it was something that was going to happen, and it died. And I'm basically trying anything to survive. So I contact people I worked with briefly in 2000, 2001, and they hire me for this crazy research position, which is a health-related company is the only way I can describe it. Everything is top secret because we're going after an industry that has billions of dollars and would love to put us out of business. So we have to be very secretive, and we have a desk filled with patents, probably 100 patents this company has just to protect itself. Because the company had tried to do it a couple of years ago and almost got sued out of existence. So that's what I'm doing now. So what do I learn from all this? I love Winston Churchill's quote, but more importantly, a couple things. When I was young and doing those independent games for Avalon Hill, I was a freaking moron not to continue doing that. I could have been a Will Wright or a George Romero. I was doing these crazy 3D games early on, but this is the thing that the guy who gave the first talk was talking about. I believed I had to get a regular job. I believed I needed a career. My parents had paid for me to go to an Ivy League school, and by gums, I was going to make that kind of money. And I did. I made amazing money early on in my career, and I'm sure my parents loved it, but I basically ended up going into careers. Now, I obviously did well at Activision. I came in at Activision, became a vice president, survived that. And obviously, I thought I had the right moved by going to educational games, and who can tell? Later on in my other talk, I will tell you that leaving Activision enabled me to finally lose all that weight. So there's a reason for that. And so basically the lesson is you should appreciate what you have when you have it. And as far as where the game industry is going, I think the mobile game industry with free-to-play kind of sucks now. And I think console games, once they get rid of the shiny disc, will go the same way. It'll be a bloodbath as everyone basically has a race to the bottom and gives away the games in hopes that in-app purchases can make up the difference. It's going to be tough. It's a tough industry. As Hunter S. Thompson says, to paraphrase Hunter S. Thompson, the video game industry is like a shallow, narrow plastic hallway where good men go to die and men die like dogs. And there's also a bad side. You know, really, it's a tough business. So anyway, questions. I actually did this on time. It's a freaking miracle. Yeah, questions? Questions? You want to complain about Return to Zork? Go ahead. There's 4,000 videos out there.
Do you feel... Whoa. Hi, everyone. Do you feel like VR is stale across the board, or do you feel like in a certain vertical it will thrive? Like if it's education or entertainment, what do you think the point of consumption is?
I think AR is winning the day because it's got practical applications and it's easy to do. I think VR needs to be much better than it is. I have, for some reason, I'm 61 years old and I have 20/10 vision. I see all the defects in VR, and I'm sure the kids do too. It just isn't good enough. And the games themselves, I had one VR game I showed here. Oh, I couldn't show it. There's a game called Adrift, which is pretty good. And there's another game done by the people who did Monument Valley, and I can't remember the name of it. And they worked really hard to simplify the interface for VR, and I think that works. What we need in VR to succeed is we need a standalone set of headset that doesn't need to connect to a computer or to a phone, and works really, really well and sells at a price point that's compatible with video game consoles and handhelds. That has to happen. It has to be so much better than it is. It has to have much more pixels. It has to wrap around more. But I've seen great things. I've seen VR applications where they actually know where your fingers are. You don't need to wear any controllers or anything. You just use your hands to grab things like that. There's great stuff out there. It isn't there yet, and it's a disappointment. But AR is going to be huge. Yes.
Did this ruin play for you? And if it did not, how did you keep play? This was your play that you made.
Yeah. I started out in the game industry because I wanted to. I wrote games I cared about. I wrote Peril because I liked, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I wrote Mac Challenger because I actually went to the first shuttle launch. I did things I liked. With Return to Zork, it was like the most whimsical thing in the world. We were completely unsupervised. The company was actually going through a Chapter 11. And we just did stupid, crazy things because we wanted to, and we got away with it. And that's why it was so good and yet so bad at the same time. It was really funny. Yeah. Yes.
You've mentioned your parents a couple times as sort of a inhibitory, a barrier to pursuing what you wanted to do. What was the emotion there? Is it something
It's simply this. My dad ran a parking garage. He was reasonably well off, but my mom's sister was extraordinarily wealthy, and I think my family always talked about money as money being important, and I picked that up. So by 84, I was making 6 figures, right? And that was a lot of money. It's actually the highest amount of money I've ever made adjusted for inflation. So I was so driven that I was willing to do whatever it took to do that. So I went to work for Epson because they offered me, I left grad school to go to Epson. I made decisions based on that, and I also adopted a lifestyle that put me into a trap. So when the dot-com crash occurred and the lifespan stock was worth nothing, I pretty much tore my life apart. I ended up divorced and having to start all over again. I lost everything. So if I had just accepted the fact that I could be an independent game guy back in the 80s, I think I would have stayed with it. I think I would have succeeded. I was certainly smart enough. I figured out how to do procedurally generated games, how to do auto mapping, all these things that came out later I had done. So I was pretty good. I think I was actually underestimating myself. And instead of just staying in grad school, writing these games, and just continuing, I basically opted for a high-powered executive career, and I don't know if I made myself happy by doing that. Though I did learn a lot about management, which I can talk about one day. Yes.
As a little bit of a continuation from that, I think a common theme that runs through your experience here, and I've seen it with other entrepreneurs pretty regularly. You're a visionary. You're in front of the curve on a lot of these things.
Way ahead.
Right. And maybe part of the reason that you didn't stick to that passion is you're not getting traction, right? You're not seeing it necessarily.
But I was in the 80s. That's the
yeah,
part.
yeah. So can you speak to that a little bit to people who might be going through the same thing now?
Yeah, paddling out too soon is as bad as paddling out late on the surf. Obviously I paddled out way too soon. With VR in some ways, but certainly with optical disc, I hit it perfectly. I did the first, as I said, I produced was considered the first CD-ROM game, and then Return to Zork. Huge successes. Certainly on the Commodore Amiga, that was fun. Certainly with video games in the early 80s, that was great. But even now, I'm basically working as a visionary, and I'm applying my management experience and my technical ability to try to solve a really big problem. But I'm so aware of how things can go wrong, and I think one of the things is, I had a family with 3 children and a wife who was at home, and it's a tough thing to go through when you have suddenly everything blows up in your face. I did a stint at a company called Save.com, so I was a major shareholder in Save.com, and the sale to DoubleClick fell apart because of an error in a document. It's like they say in the movie The Jerk. It's not the money I missed; it's all the stuff, right? But I actually I think I've come to accept that, and basically happy now to have decent employment and working on something meaningful, much more meaningful than this. I'm working on something that will save millions of lives if it works. So I'm very pleased where I am now, but it's a really weird road to get here. And I'm very freaking lucky to get a job at my age that's an executive job, because no one wants to hire anyone above 60, to be honest. So mainly because of medical insurance. You should see how much they have to pay for medical insurance. It's freaking awful. Yes, anyone else? Okay, well, I enjoyed that. Thank you.